Report to the five-star generals. On the evening of October 29th, global situation updates have arrived. First piece of intelligence. The assassination case of Shinzo Abe has officially gone to trial. The No. 1 male gunman of Japan has confessed on the spot. After more than 3 years, the trial for the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has finally begun at the Nara District Court. The 45-year-old suspect, Tetsuya Yamagami, pleaded guilty in court, calmly stating that he would leave everything to his lawyers and made no attempt to defend himself. According to reports, Abe's death was not only caused by Yamagami's homemade firearm, but also by the actions of Abe's aides. The repeated chest compressions allegedly worsened his condition. The gunshots had ruptured Abe's heart vessels, leading to massive bleeding. Before the ambulance arrived, each time his aides pressed on his chest, blood reportedly gushed out again. For some reason, they never attempted proper bleeding control. One can imagine Abe lying on the ground, perhaps silently cursing his aide for being an idiot. As for Yamagami, some argue for leniency, perhaps a bar would suffice. After all, he could have chosen to use a bomb, but instead opted for a gun to avoid harming bystanders, minimizing the damage. That shows the degree of conscience. He was not an utterly evil man. The second piece of intelligence. Just days after the situation calmed down, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered an immediate and powerful strike on Gaza. That very night, Gaza City and the southern Sabra neighborhood were hit by airstrikes. Areas near Al-Shifa Hospital were bombed, leaving at least 9 people dead, including children. Last week, Trump sent his son-in-law Jared Kushner and Vice President Vance to Israel to pressure for maintaining the ceasefire. However, Israel coordinated directly with the U.S. before launching the attack. When reporters questioned whether the ceasefire agreement had been broken, U.S. Vice President Vance insisted that the ceasefire was still in effect, claiming it was only a small-scale clash. The third piece of intelligence. The Philippines has come up with a new stunt to smear China, claiming to have seized containers of cyanide that turned out to be dish soap bottles. In an attempt to defame China, the Philippines has completely lost face this time. A Navy spokesperson announced that a Chinese fishing boat had been intercepted near Renai Reef, and the containers holding cyanide had been confiscated, accusing China of damaging the marine environment. However, once the video was released, it became clear that the so-called cyanide containers were just ordinary Chinese plastic dish soap bottles. It's well known that cyanide must be stored in specialized anti-corrosive containers. Putting it in a dish soap bottle would cause leakage. There's no way such bottles could be used for toxic substances. According to international rules, when a vessel is detained, the crew must also be held, and the country of origin notified for a handover. Yet the Philippines hastily released the boat after shooting a short video, claiming they didn't want to provide food and lodging for the Chinese fishermen. This was nothing but a self-directed farce. After all, the Philippines itself is notorious for using cyanide in fishing, a classic case of the guilty party making the first accusation. Fourth piece of intelligence. During Trump's visit to Japan, Tokyo tried to play a little trick. At the welcoming ceremony, they deliberately placed the Japanese and American flags close to the camera to create a forced perspective shot that would make it look like Trump was bound to the Japanese flag. Similar tricks had previously fooled Yoon Suk-yeol and Olaf Scholz. However, despite several subtle hints from Senator Takaichi, Trump completely ignored her and walked straight ahead. Caught off guard, Takaichi awkwardly bowed by herself and then hurried to catch up. Trying to play mind games in front of Papa Trump, she's still too green for that. Fifth piece of intelligence. Zelensky keeps shouting that as long as we get weapons, we can win. But German media has completely exposed him. According to reports, the scale of desertion in the Ukrainian army is staggering. Minus 290,000 cases have already been officially filed, roughly equivalent to the entire strength of Germany's Bundeswehr. And that doesn't even count the unreported deserters, which could be just as many. Most of these soldiers were forcibly conscripted and have no desire to fight, so the only option is to flee. Zelensky keeps claiming that Ukraine's army is approaching NATO standards. But if he can't even keep his soldiers from running away, no amount of weapons can fill the hole left by mass desertion. Sixth piece of intelligence. Russia has just unveiled another major move, confirming that by the end of this year, it will deploy its Hazel Tree hypersonic missiles in Belarus. When this missile was used against Ukraine last year, Zelensky even mistook it for an intercontinental missile, which shows just how powerful it is. While Zelensky continues to beg the United States for Tomahawk cruise missiles, the Kremlin has issued a direct warning. If Washington dares to supply them, it will trigger catastrophic consequences. On one side, Russia is placing missiles right on NATO's doorstep. On the other, Ukraine is facing severe shortages of troops and commanders. Zelensky's hope of turning the tide with Western weapons is pure fantasy. The US and Europe don't dare to take that gamble. And even if they do, Ukraine would be reckless enough to actually use them. Seventh piece of intelligence. Ukraine's bid to join the European Union has hit a major roadblock. Hungary is the first to oppose it, joining forces with the Czech Republic and Slovakia to form an anti-Ukraine alliance. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán bluntly stated that Ukraine's EU membership bid is an attempt to drag NATO into a war against Russia and would also bring significant economic risks. The newly appointed Czech leadership is also not favorable towards Zelensky. With these three countries working together, the pro-Ukraine faction within the EU will find it far more difficult to push Ukraine's accession. Even Western experts acknowledge that in its current condition, Ukraine joining the EU would not be an asset, but rather a liability.